Jordan. Bernie Willie. Bill Matthews. Jimmy Davis. Dave Manella. Kirk Drum. Ron Randolph.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. A few announcements, the regular ones that we do every month. Phones and pagers, please put them on silent or turn them off. Appeals, if you disagree with this commission on any of the cases, you have the right to appeal it to the council. There are appeal cards over to my right on the area over there, the railing. Speaker cards, if you plan on speaking, please fill out one of the speaker cards and turn it in to staff. They'll get it up here to us. That way we have a record of who spoke, and if there's something that comes up after the fact, we know who to contact. Each side will have 10 minutes to speak, and there'll be a 5-minute rebuttal allowed. Once your case is heard, please exit the building. Don't go out in the foyer out there because the sound does come back into the area. Please stand for the invocation. Mr. Randolph.
Let's bow our heads. Gracious Father, once again, we stand before you with bowed down heads, lifted heart to say thank you for watching over, protecting us this day to this point in time. We thank you for this commission. Thank you for the parish that we serve as well as the council. Bless us in a mighty way and help us to make the decisions that are beneficial to the citizens of this parish. And all these blessings we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Mr. Lord, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, in your packets, you had the minutes from the January 7th meeting. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it. Is there any changes that need to be made? Mr. Randolph? Your lights on? Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes of January 7th. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Lauren. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Staff, we have any cases to be postponed, withdrawn?
Yes, sir. Just to announce that number 1, ZC 13-11-079, has been officially withdrawn.
Been officially withdrawn.
But it's withdrawn?
Officially.
Just to announce to make sure maybe some officially withdrawn. I'm sorry. Sorry for the misunderstanding here.
And it's my understanding item 2 has also been withdrawn. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
It's been officially withdrawn too.
It has been officially. And seriously, number 3, ZC 14-02-015. The petitioner is here in the audience, and he would like to request to postpone his case indefinitely, considering the upcoming text change number ZC 14-02-018 at this time. And the petitioner is here in the audience, and if you would like him to come to the podium to concur with the request to
Yeah,
table.
I think it would be a good idea. Is Mr. Fanning? Yes. So it's your desire to have this postponed indefinitely?
Correct.
Okay, we will concur with your request as long as the majority of the commission vote for it, and I'm sure they probably will.
All right.
Pardon? Yeah, I guess,
First two withdrawn, so we've got first case. We have for the record.
do what now? You lost.
Like you usually do.
Zoning case 14-02-015 has been postponed indefinitely at the petitioner's request. Do we need to vote on that?
Yeah, motion to postpone.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Matthews, seconded by Davis. Okay, I heard somebody down here. All right, please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, page 2, item 4, zoning case 14-02-016. Existing zoning is a planned unit development overlay PUD. Proposed zoning is an I-1 industrial at 6.31 acres. Petitioner is Melissa Warren. The owner is Jack Bizou. Parcel located on the east side of Howes Beach Road, south of Paul Street, Ward 9, District 13. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed as a planned district, including a mix of uses and a variety of density. Staff does not have any objections to the request, considering that the abutting property is zone I-4 heavy industrial. Just as a note, the site has been rezoned to PUD as part of the Lakeshore Estates subdivision rezoning request in 2001. However, the site is not part of the subdivision, and staff would like to recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Who do we have in the audience to represent Mr. Bizou?
I'm Jacques Bazoo. I really don't have anything to say. I'll answer any questions you might have, sir.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Mr. Matthews?
Mr. Bazoo, from the map we have, it appears that your PUD, or your piece of property, does not actually abut the I-4. Is this correct? That there's a piece of property between your property and the I-4 zone?
Well, I think it abuts it. Melissa she's the real estate
Okay.
broker. She could probably.
My name is Melissa Warren. I'm his agent. It shares a property line with Clico, who came in and purchased an easement and a portion of land from Mr. Bazoo to put a station in the back. So that's what it abuts, and after that is a canal, and then the heavy industrial.
Okay,
So, yeah, it's kind of
what is the piece of property that actually abuts? this piece of
Clico's easement.
Okay, what is it zoned? Helen, do you know what it's actually zoned?
What, the Clico easement?
Yeah.
It's still, it's zone PUD.
What's the underlying zoning? Isn't there an
Where
underlying
there
zoning?
was no underlying zoning, because the Lakeshore Estates PUD was rezoned in 2001.
Okay.
This property is not part of the PUD. It was rezoned to PUD, but it shouldn't have been rezoned to PUD. So right now, they're just trying to
Take the
rezone
PUD
it to
off? They're trying to take the PUD off of this piece of property?
correct, and put the correct zoning on the property.
Okay. The piece of property on the other side that's in the PUD, that's residential though?
No,
No?
there's a concrete plant on that property,
Okay.
sir.
I think that's where the concrete batching plant for
Yeah, I
Lakeshore
know.
Estates is located.
Look at the property, I didn't. Okay. Okay. All right, okay.
The I-4 is a boat manufacturing?
No,
So this is just to put everything in
understand, yeah.
compliance, is basically all it is. And Clico does own this property.
No, sir.
Mr. Bazoo
My
owns
client, Jacques Bazou, owns this property.
Okay?
There's a small key in the back where you'll see that Clico on the survey has a small
okay.
portion and an easement down the side. He sold that to Clico.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'd move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews, second by Mr. Randolph. I do have one question, and maybe staff can answer it. Ms. Williams, maybe you can, Warner, excuse me, maybe you can answer it. On our, in our packet, there's a white section right next to the I-4 and the piece of property we're talking about. Is that an error, or
That's a
is there?
strip.
May I see what
Oh,
you're
that-
referring? Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
The sliver where, between the I-4 and the.
That looks like a printing
Yeah,
error
that's
to
just the
me.
lines of the mapping not lining up, of the
Okay.
polygons on the map.
Okay,
It-
we don't
the-
want one of these situations where we ended up with an I-4.
No, under the rules of the ordinance, the district is assumed to follow the property lines. If
Okay.
you remember your maps, on every map we produce and get to you, it has for planning purposes only, not a survey, for those kinds of issues.
All right. Pardon? Yeah, okay. All right. We have a motion and a second to approve, but we have some opposition. Do we have any opposition in the audience on this? I don't see none, so I'm going to close the floor to the public and accept the motion and second to approve. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 5, zoning case 14-02-017, ordinance to amend the St. Tammany Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1, zoning, Section 2, definition, and Section 5, zoning districts relative to the new Section 5.38, advanced manufacturing and logistics district. Staff?
Mr. Chairman, over the last few years, we've had a number of situations where we've been approached by potential businesses or seen possible opportunities as through contacts through state economic development for advanced manufacturing or warehousing facilities. They are not large in number, but they're significant in the technology and the job creation and value that they bring to a parish. We actually do have 3 facilities similar to what you would be allowed in this zoning district. Now, this is a zoning district. We're proposing the district. We have not identified any land for that district. Obviously, we would come back to you for consideration of any particular parcel of land. Those 3 facilities that are in the parish are Folgers, which is about 600,000 square feet. It was done through a conditional use, and actually they have approval to almost 1 million square feet, as that was going to be phase 2 of the development potentially. Their site is set up so that they could expand that facility. Rooms to Go in Pearl River is at about 870,000 square feet. Again, a distribution center for that company. And adjacent to that in Pearl River is Associated Warehouse or Wholesale Grocers. They are at about 860,000 square feet. Obviously, it is critical that if we do have this type of zoning, that we put it in the right place, make sure we have proper access to the interstates, which in all 3 of those cases we do. Folgers can get to 190, to I-12, down 434, and the other 2 facilities can exit almost directly onto the interstate out of Pearl River. Actually, Rooms to Go and AWG, we would not be able to do in unincorporated St. Tammany Parish because our maximum building size right now is 200,000 square feet, which was designed for the big boxes, the large-scale facilities. They're generally in the 180 to 200,000 square foot retail. But when you talk about this large-scale logistics and warehousing, advanced manufacturing, they would approach 1 million square feet. And so what we're proposing is that we identify that the parameters by which we would consider land for this type of development. Just a few highlights we're trying not to make it a strictly industrial district. I know speaking to a couple of the members, there are some uses proposed that are at that borderline. Do we want them? Do we not want them in this type of advanced manufacturing district? We decided to keep them in for discussion purposes. We went back and forth on a few of those uses. And again, the proposal is to allow up to 1 million square feet of each building. By the way, I also ran the numbers on the Walmart facility out of Robert, off of an aerial, and it is 880,000 square feet. So we have 4 examples of distribution within 20 miles of this facility, of where we are today, and all of those are in that range. As other key issues, we would obviously have all of the same standards, the landscaping, green space, lot coverage that you'd have any other time. So all the requirements on drainage, on the requirements on traffic. The building height we're proposing for these facilities is 100 feet. We have a number of facilities in the parish that are pushing the other kind of normal break in our regulations at 60 feet. The construction of the new hotel behind, just off of Louis Prima, behind Copeland's, is at 60 feet. We actually had to do some adjustments to the parapets to get them at the 60-foot mark. So that gives you an idea of that scale. So we have existing buildings in the parish that are pushing that. We think 100 foot on something of this scale would not be out of scale for this type of facility. And so, subject to your discussion and consideration, we recommend approval of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fontenot. Commission members, pardon? Do we have any members of the audience that wish to speak on this? Yes, sir.
Carlo Hernandez. I have a couple of questions. I'm looking at the permitted uses on number 15. It says, general offices and services which provide support to any of the permitted uses. Now, does that mean that this general office would have to be within the same lot of the development, or it could be on a different lot, different area of the parish or out of the parish? They could say they're general offices for such and such a facility, which is located somewhere else, couldn't they? Or am I wrong about that?
I think what you'd see, and we've seen this happen with some of our other, I'll call them anchor-type tenants that have come in, to use some of the terminology of the real estate industry. You will have the big anchor, the big use will come in. Then you'll have accessory uses that feed off of that, provide services to that facility. When Chevron moved here, Chevron wasn't the only company that moved here. Log relocated. A number of companies relocated to North Park. I think Chevron caused the expansion largely to because of Chevron. You've had an expansion. We have at least 2 other major constructions happening in that expansion of North Park. So you have those kinds of facilities that in the automotive industry, they will be providing services to that factory. Computer industry, data centers. It is somewhat wide open. We don't want to strangle ourselves, but the idea is to have support functions allowed and not just require that we have these massive manufacturing and logistical buildings, and then they have to travel 5 miles for an accounting firm who does their work.
So it's possible that they don't have to be next to each other, then it could be some distance apart.
Absolutely.
So that is possible. You know, one of the things that you're consistent in is the minimum lot size area, 20,000 square feet. Now, there are some communities that go along that increase the minimum lot size as the square foot building size increases. Now, here, you know, for 20,000 square feet, and using the 10 stories that you're permitting or proposing here, obviously, and even though it may not be realistic, but it's possible that you could use 50% of the land area, let's say 10,000 square feet, that you could build on a 20,000 square foot lot. 10 stories, 100,000 square feet. So clearly, you're not getting anywhere near as close to the million that you're looking for. So you're obviously looking for somewhere at a minimum of 200,000 square foot lot area. I'm not suggesting that you increase it to that, but what I am suggesting is that you increase the minimum lot area to something that's more than 20,000 square feet, maybe in the order of 50,000 or up square feet, you know, something more realistic than that. It's an interesting situation, and I guess you're going big time here. A million square feet is pretty dramatic increase from, as you noted, from what you've had in the past. Right now, I think 500,000 square feet in I-3, I think, is where, or is it I-4, that you have it at right now in terms of a lot size. So, I mean, this is a dramatic increase. I'd be interested to see, you know, where you say that it's got to be located somewhere within, you know, a good transportation access to this. But then again, you know, you could be, again, theoretically, some distance from that, not right next to the interstate, but Folgers, for instance, is not right next to the interstate, and, you know, there's some distance away. So I guess if you're looking at Folgers as an example, or that it's not necessarily right next to the interstate then. So you could, it's interesting, but you say you haven't identified any pieces yet that you would go for this, and that would be the next step, assuming that you do go with, you know, this 1 million square feet and the 100-foot setback. So, yes, thank you for answering those questions.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this? I'll close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. Mr. Matthews.
Sydney, I kind of agree with Carlo. Is that 20,000 square foot appropriate? Should we raise that, or is there a reason for that?
It would be appropriate if you're a relatively small footprint, providing one of the services to one of the other businesses. If you have a 2.5 acre, 50,000 square foot, 2.5, almost, acre and a half, and it's a small office, then you're underbuilding for that lot. This is a minimum lot size. Means
No, I
that's the
understand that.
smallest you can do. If it's too small, you expand the lot. Mr. Hernandez's theoretical would be a 1/4 acre building that meet all the setbacks, goes up 10 stories. I don't know which one of these manufacturing operations would do that, unless Stennis is moving here, and we start building
Yeah,
fuel tanks.
most distribution and these type of people.
Yeah, they're gonna
manufacturing,
spread out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a minimum. We don't want people creating
2 or 3 stories high,
extremely small lots. Now, if it's more appropriate, if there's a reason to have a different number, I have no problem with a different number.
It just seemed like.
But I've never heard a reason why it should be something different, except that it's the same as some of the others.
Okay, it just seemed like 20,000 when you're talking about a possible 1,000,000 square foot building, seemed like an awfully small
We're clearly not
footprint.
gonna put the 1,000,000 square foot building on a 20,000 square foot lot.
Okay, I understand. That is the minimum, and you would expect most of them to be larger.
Absolutely.
Okay. One other question. Under the administrative permits, number 5, the wastewater treatment facility, what are you envisioning that to be, and why is that there?
That's the same wastewater treatment facility we have in all of our, I hate saying almost all of our districts. We have administrative permits to provide the basic infrastructure for development. And so wastewater treatment permits at one time was a condition of use in almost every district. As to making them permitted uses, we want to have some kind of review of them at the staff level, distance from residential, location, those types of things. They've been placed as APs, as administrative permits.
We had, a year or so ago, I guess, a company that was trying to come in here and put a wastewater treatment facility, kind of a standalone thing, and people hated it and didn't want it. I think it was wound up being turned down. But is that the type of facility that this encompasses, or is it a
No.
wastewater treatment facility that's part of the garment manufacturing?
If you remember, that was a septic tank refuge or septic treatment facility that the material was being trucked on site. That was not treatment of the materials on site, of the sewage on site. We have sewage treatment facilities back behind Popeyes. We have sewage treatment facilities relatively close to every subdivision in this parish, if not in the subdivisions. That's what we're talking, the wastewater treatment. That's for the treatment of the effluent from businesses and residences.
But this doesn't say it's limited to that.
The definition does. We have a specific, if you remember when we did the solid waste districts, we have a specific definition for septic facility.
Okay. All right. Answer my questions, I think.
Okay, Ms. Casabon?
Yes, I think this has been well thought out, and I think they've worked on this for quite a while. I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Ms. Casabon to approve. Do I have a second? Ron Randolph seconds. Jimmy, you have a comment?
Yes, Sydney, I do have one more question, and I approve this, but I think we do have to look at that minimum, because just on the next page, you start talking about if the building is taller than 25 feet, you have to have an additional 1 foot of setback. So it just doesn't make kind of sense to me to have that minimum that low. That's just something that I think needs to be investigated.
All right, any other comments from the commissioners? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 6, zoning case 14-02-018, ordinance to amend the Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1, zoning, Section 5.14, NC1 Professional Office District relative to adding single-family dwelling, private garages and accessory structures, and garage apartment or guest house under 1,000 square feet of habitable floor space as permitted uses. Staff?
We've had, actually since before the comprehensive rezoning, and on a number of occasions since then, we've had an occasion where we've had an issue with a single-family residence being zoned commercial, trying to look out to the future. That usually involved somebody wanting to expand their residence, do an addition, do that type of thing. A recent, something that has recently come to our attention sometime over this summer is that the banking industry has taken a stance, and it may be part of their standard stances, that we just didn't see because of the downturn in the economy since 2008, or maybe they started paying more attention to it since 2008, since the issue with the real estate market. But we have had some citizens who have had difficulty and sometimes the inability to sell their homes, for their buyers to get financing when the property is zoned commercial and it's a residential house. Realizing that, we've worked with a councilman who really brought it to our attention because it hit a significant portion of her district along on the backside of 59 going down towards Mandeville, where you have a lot of residences that, those of you who have been on the commission for a while, we've seen 59 slowly transitioning to commercial. So you have now a mixture of fronting. And then occasionally you'll get somebody who will buy deeper, and I can think of 3 or 4 buildings under construction on 59 right now, office space. The kind of thing we envision in neighborhood commercial, professional office space. But unfortunately, when the decision was made to go back, go 1 block deep instead of a half block deep with that commercial designation, and with the banking rules, or the rules that the banks are now imposing in order to provide financing, we've ended up in a situation where people cannot sell their homes. They want to upgrade. They've picked out homes. They have buyers ready. Those buyers cannot get financing. So what we're hoping to do is, by simply adding the single-family residential as a permitted use in the NC1, that carries it all the way up to HC4. So it handles all of those issues. And that will free up the banks. You have a permitted use. You have the issue where if the house burns down more than 50%, or if there's damage more than 50%, they can rebuild. These are the kind of minute details that if we don't pay attention, and then somebody all of a sudden starts saying, no, we need to follow this provision of our standards, you end up being the situation we're in. So it was an unintended consequences, I think, brought on by a number of issues. We didn't have this issue and really until, in any significant number at least, until probably June or so, April, June, sometime this summer, where it really came to our attention that it was a widespread problem. So we're recommending, concurring with the council member who proposed this, and recommending that you approve the change to allow single-family residential in those commercial districts.
Thank you, Mr. Fontenot. We have a number of people in the audience that have turned in speaker cards that wish to speak. Is Mr. Newman? Dave Newman? Come forward and let us hear from you.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Dave Newman. I'm a realtor in St. Tammany Parish, and I concur 100% with what the gentleman just said. Apparently, it was an unintended consequence that no one could have foreseen, where, for example, my client paid $200,000 for a single-family residence 10 years ago on the street in an area that's all residential, and now come to find out that we can't sell the property. It's basically worthless because the lenders will not give a loan based on the current regulations, because after 6 months, the home, if it's unoccupied, say they tried to rent it and couldn't rent it for 6 months, or if it burned down or a tree hit it during a hurricane, if it is not occupied as residential for 6 month period, it automatically reverts to commercial which means the homeowner could not rebuild their house, they can't sell it. It places a real hardship and a burden on a large number of people, and this was clearly, no one could have anticipated that this would really be the case, I think, but it definitely is. So I strongly urge you to go with the zoning's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
Thank you.
We have 4 other speaker cards, but they're not marked, you wish to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak on this in the audience? Yes, sir. Come forward, state your name.
Hello, my name is Anthony Marino, and I'm here representing my company, M Properties. I'm requesting a reversal of an unsolicited arbitrary rezoning of 10 lots in the subdivision I developed in 2007, Palm Courts, which is located in Madisonville at the intersection of Rex Road and Vista. When I developed Palm Courts in 2006 and completed in 2007, I did so in the spirit of helping to solve the affordable housing problem in the Mandeville-Madisonville area. After listening to Tim Ryan, economics professor at UNO, and Parish President Kevin Davis, expressed the
Marino?
need for 17,000
Mr.
more.
Marino,
Excuse
let
me?
Let me stop you right there.
Yes.
I'm of the opinion that this, what you're saying, has nothing to do with the item that we have on the agenda.
Well, you're absolutely wrong, because it exactly has that to do. And if you let me finish, I'll show you where it does and how much it's cost me personally, because I can't sell my property.
Okay, all right.
May I
Go
continue?
ahead.
Thank you. Okay, 17,000 more homes needed in St. Tammany Parish between 2006 and 2011. I proceeded with the project even though the national home building economy is tanking. At the same time, I was approached by a company out of Baton Rouge representing St. Tammany Parish, asking for a donation of land at the northern end of Palm Courts for the construction of what was termed the South I-12 Service Road. It was to connect Highway 1077 to Highway 1085, giving the people on the south side of I-12 living and utilizing Highway 1085 a direct path to the I-12 Highway 1077 interchange. It would have alleviated traffic on the substandard roadway, Brewster Road, traveling east and west. I donated the land as well as redesigning north end of the subdivision in a manner which would have provided ingress and egress for the whole Three Rivers subdivision, as well as anyone coming to or from Brewster Road, to the road that would have gone directly to the Highway 1077 I-12 interchange, instead of the original dead-end cul-de-sac design. I also gave the parish a 1-acre right-of-way from the proposed road directly into the 55 acres adjacent to Palm Courts, which I own. This acreage was planned to be commercial on the north end and residential Phase 2 of Palm Courts on the south end. I know that the proposed road was completely engineered, the property completely donated, and the project was approved by the parish to be built. At the same time, without my knowledge and request, the northern 10 lots in the Palm Courts subdivision were rezoned to highway commercial after the subdivision was completed and there were people living in the subdivision. This was an arbitrary action which resulted in the 10 lots being taken out of commerce for several reasons. First, the proposed road was not constructed to this day, which gives no access to the commercial property from the proposed South Service Road, which was supposedly the reason that the property was rezoned to highway commercial. Secondly, there was already a home built and occupied before the rezoning of the lots on Lot 31. So someone was living on one of the lots that were rezoned. Thirdly, the restrictions of the subdivision, which were approved and recorded by the parish, and so stated on the plat, designated as a residential zoning for all lots in the subdivision and allowed for no other use. Additionally, no mortgage company will get title insurance written on this property for residential use and therefore will not finance a home while the property is zoned a non-conforming use of highway commercial in a restricted single-family subdivision. Also, the parish will not allow a permit to be issued for single-family residential construction within this unsolicited zoning. I have a buyer, but they will not go through with the sale due to the unsolicited arbitrary zoning issue. After I was made aware of the subdivision, I attempted to allow the parish to remedy the situation. They refused to do so without my paying a $450 fee for each lot. Honestly, I do not have $4,500 to do this, and I feel I should not have to. I've already paid $156,000 in developmental fees up front in the subdivision and cannot even sell the lots. I'm trying to sell the lots below my cost that I had to construct and cannot even do that. I request that the zoning of the lots, numbers 22 through 31 inclusive, which were zoned highway commercial, be immediately reversed to the original restricted residential zoning, Palm Courts, at no cost to me. These lots have been taken out of commerce for 5 years, and I have continually paid interest and property taxes amounting to over $175,000, in addition to the $156,000. I have suffered enough. I ask that you do the right thing and remedy this situation.
Thank you, Mr. Marino.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask our legal staff here, but it sounds like this ordinance right here will solve your problem as far as being able to sell the residential. Mr. Hand?
That's correct. So this is going to be a permitted use now. A single-family residence will be a permitted use on the zoning that you currently have. But you made a statement that you want your property rezoned to residential.
Well, I wasn't aware of the wording of this proposal before I wrote what I wrote.
Okay.
So if it does in effect the same thing, as allows the use of a single-family residence to be constructed, that's the same as being rezoned in my interest.
Just so you understand.
Yes, sir.
So I know you concur with that? Okay. He's a director of development and planning.
Yes.
And he's very involved with this, and he concurred with my statement.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Carlo?
Yes, thank you. Carlo Hernandez. I have a question about this proposal here. I think you alluded to it, but just to make it clear, even though it starts with NC1, this goes throughout the whole HC3. I mean, it would stop, I'm assuming, is it HC3, which is the last one, or?
Yeah, it would go through the NCs and the HCs because each one references the previous.
Correct. My question is, NC1 starts with 5,000 square foot building size. So theoretically, on an NC1, you could have a 5,000 square foot home. Is that correct? So my question then becomes, under the HC, where you go to 200,000, theoretically, you can then have a 200,000 square foot home then built on the lot. Is that correct?
Theoretically correct, and that's why I'd want a 200,000 square foot home.
I see. Okay. All right. So, it's interesting that, this goes throughout the process and apparently is associated with the commercial zoning. So in theory, you could have very, very big buildings right next to, a commercial facility. So you could buy an HC whatever zoning, put a house there if that's what you wanted to do, with the intent, I guess, years in the future of selling it for that. It's an interesting concept because normally, you as you tried to do, I guess, in the comprehensive rezoning, you tried to segment residential and commercial, but now it looks like we're going back to where you can now have them right next to each other, which is obviously what's going to happen now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Ryan Arsenault, resident of 1217 Lafitte Street, and I'm kind of in that group off of 59. And to go back with just, I am for this, adding it back to, I am a homeowner, have been for 11 years now. In 2009, unaware to many of my neighbors, after finding this out, we were not aware of the whole rezoning of the whole block. I think there was appropriate notice, I'm sure, on newspapers and all that. I think some signage was seen on the 59 side, and nobody was even thinking that on Lafitte Street, even though our backyards back up to the backyards from 59, that it would, you know, if you look down the street, it's all residential homes. And there's even been examples that we found that people have bought after 2009 when the rezoning was done, and their appraisals of coming back residential. And so some people have bought a home thinking they're buying a residential home, and now coming to find out, because we put our house for sale, and this came up from the neighbor down the street from the summer, that she said we may have some issues. And so seeing, bringing that to their fact, they thought they bought a residential lot because their appraisal said it. The bank gave them financing, everything was, you know, A-okay, until now they're finding out that they didn't buy a residential lot. They bought an NC4. And so I think the half block versus the whole block is kind of coming into play. Going back to what the last gentleman was talking about, how the resident and the commercial will be integrated, but it's across the street is a whole residential subdivision, so it is already integrated. And I think that's what this is, the NC4 is meant to kind of integrate, you know, our transition point. But, you know, when one side of the street is going to stay residential, because it is the residential side, allowing this to exist, you know, just help. It's a residential street. I understand the 25-year picture, but I own it now and was looking to sell it. And it's even coming to light of the two other ordinance about the damage more than 50%. We're still haven't gotten it clarified, but we don't even think the insurance company may pay us the value of the home because that structure can't be rebuilt as a residence. Another structure in accordance with is listed under the zoning would then have to be rebuilt. So we really feel like we own, you know, have been paying for a house for 11 years now, and it's worth zero in our eyes, even insured. I mean, it really just kind of, it was heartbreaking to find this out that it occurred 4 years ago too. And I had actually had my home refinanced 2 years ago, and that appraisal came back as residential. So either the appraisers are not on the same page as the whole zoning board, or, you know, and we can't get an answer of who's liable for that as well. So I think, you know, this seems to be, besides just going and individually doing the individual houses that want to be residential still, which was one option we brought up, but she said that this would kind of just take care of everything and have it where it would be the you know, the businesses or the businesses that are allowed that wanted to buy the properties could mingle in with. I mean, I come from Thibodaux, Louisiana, and Canal Street, it's law offices, and then it's two houses together, and then there's a antique store, and then two more, you know, on the main street. It's, you know, there are examples that they are mingled together, and I think it would work good in this area, especially being that residential areas are right on the other side of the street as well. So I thank you for your time, and hope we get this approved.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Vicki Warren. I'm at 1201 Lafitte, and I am the person who bought the house after the zoning was changed, unaware. The previous owners claimed they were unaware, appraisers unaware, everybody's unaware of the zoning change. So I've got a whole nother issue to deal with. But it would help to have this amendment passed so that we can at some point hope to sell the house, because as it stands now, it is worthless. We cannot be rebuilt as a single family. We're not even sure we can use it as a single family right now. So we're in violation, basically. But we'd like to have this amendment passed. Ultimately, we'd love to have it returned to residential because everything around us is residential, but I understand that's not likely to happen. But if you could please pass this amendment, we would at least have some value in our property again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Terry Lewis Stevens. I'm an architect and director of Concerned Citizens of Covington. But what I want to ask about this particular issue is, you've crossed the line now with these zonings, whether it happened during the comprehensive rezoning or not. People such as these who have bought these houses as residential now may end up in the situation like the Big Branch folks, where they could get a car lot put in to a lot next to theirs, unbeknownst to them. So have there been any considerations as to additional buffering between commercial properties and residential properties to protect the people who will be buying these existing residences? I mean, it may stay residential, except the influx of business could come in. So what kind of additional landscaping requirements should we perhaps consider to put into place between the commercial uses and the residential uses to better buffer these people in the future? I hope that you would consider something. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a speaker card? Would you please fill out a speaker card and turn it in to staff, please? Okay, they're down here on the end. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? I'll close the floor to the public, bring it back to the commission. We've got 3 lights on. I'll start down here with Mr. Casabon.
Yes, this is something that I think we really need to correct, and I think the staff has looked at this again and has looked at all the possibilities that the ordinance is something that's going to be needed for these people and other people that are in this situation. Do we know of any others, other areas in which this is taking place? A lot of them?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure that there are. Again, it's
Yep.
you know, if people purchased houses without this question coming up in 2009, it's clearly
Yes.
something changed in the financing industry where, you know, if it was a
Right.
standard before, they're paying attention to that standard. If it wasn't a standard before, they've changed their rules, because we haven't had this issue come up. Because we've had this situation before the comprehensive rezoning, where we
Right.
had residential properties in commercially zoned areas. I can think of some areas in the Pearl River area where we had a gentleman who was expanding his house. This will solve that kind of problem too. This is the first time it's come up with this particular scenario.
Correct.
But again, instead of going from lot to lot and you seeing one of these every couple months, we decided, you know,
needed the
it's not, may not be the ideal situation, but we're having to adapt to the development that has taken place over the last almost 100 years.
Well,
Town of Mandeville subdivision was laid out in the 1920s.
right.
So this stuff has developed over the last 100 years. So you have that mixture. You have mixture of uses in downtown Covington.
Well, and
Alma Trailhead,
anything now
Mandeville.
with
You know, in some
what
places,
we've-
we're promoting the mixing of the uses
Right.
of these small-scale commercial uses.
And
So
I think what we did was not intentional, but it's also that we've become more aware of the banking rules, because the banking rules have gotten so stringent that making us aware of these things, and now once we're aware of it, it is our responsibility to correct it. I'd make a motion to approve.
Okay. We have a motion to approve. We have 2 more people that'd like to speak, Martha, so I want to hold that motion till we hear from them. Mr. Matthews.
Well, this seems to take care of a lot of the properties that are going to be in transitioning, like we were speaking about here off of Lafitte and all that, are transitioning from residential to commercial, and this will cover all of those properties. And it's something I think we probably need to do. And I want to, when you build your 200,000 square foot house, will we be invited to the housewarming?
I'm not even going to come close to 200,000 square feet. And I think we foresaw something similar to this in the rural areas, where we were projecting commercial, and somebody may want to give their kids the property until the development moves up there. We created the rural overlay, and that was done to a very similar question. If this was appropriate for the rural overlay, or we had another tool, we would have suggested that. But we don't have that. This is not, I don't think we can in good conscience call this a rural area.
No, and
The
we
one
just
we're
had
talking
that
about.
problem last month.
Yeah,
We dealt with it in the rural overlay.
Yeah.
Which this is what we probably should have done if we'd have had this available.
and I think that, going off what Martha was saying, I really appreciate the patience of the citizens who are involved in this. I know that's a trying situation. I'm trying to sell a house right now, too. So, and not going to 200,000, but I'm trying to sell a house, too. So I understand the stress that they're under, and happy that they have buyers, and we need to try and get their property moving.
And will second Martha's motion when she makes it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Davis?
Oh, boy. Sydney, I agree that this will solve a lot of problems that we have. My only question is, could it actually create one problem? As is, if this is allowed in NC1, could a person actually have a law office, single-family dwelling, and a mother-in-law house on the same property? Could he have all three,
Separate buildings,
as written?
I think in theory he could if he has enough land.
Now,
It
you
would
say
not,
enough
it would
land.
not be on the typical lot.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm
but-
just
but
trying
yeah,
to,
if-
I'm
if
trying
he
to
ha-
go
if
in
he
the
have enough
other way
land-
and just make sure we're,
I'm trying to think if there's an exact example, but in places like Terabella, they promote that.
yeah.
You'll have, first floor will be an office, second floor will be a residence, you'll have a garage apartment in the back.
Well,
So
I
it-
know
it's-
and you know that's
Yeah,
not
the-
gonna
the
happen,
classic-
but,
The classic, Euclidean zoning, and I'm throwing out technical terms, where everything is separated, this is an issue. And the way things developed before World War II, and the way that in some areas we're developing now, this kind of mixture, as long as we're not talking very large commercial properties next to residential, the mixture of small residential and small commercial is, take Highway 21st going out of Covington, going from downtown going west. Take up and down 59, all the way down into Mandeville. You have that mixture of the small uses, and ideally, you're doing something on the scale of the residences. You're not doing a 3-4-story building overlooking a house. You're renovating an old house. You're doing something on the same scale as a house. Like I said, there are a couple under construction right now down Highway 59.
yeah, but does this open up something for the parish for an individual in the NC1 that has a minimum square foot of a 20,000 square foot lot to build 3 different things on it? Is there a problem? I'm just, I'm agreeing we need to take care of all these people's problems, but is there a problem with?
It would be, on a 20,000 square foot, it'd be difficult with your parking, landscaping, drainage, all those issues. In theory, big enough piece of property, yes, you can. And that's what I'm asking, what is the issue with that? If you're of the mindset that everything needs to be absolutely segregated, post-World War II America until probably the last 10, 20 years, yeah, there's an issue with that. That traditional zoning from the 1940s on. If you're believing mixed use and letting people walking to work, or maybe you live in the same house you work in,
Right.
it's not an issue. This allows a transition area. It allows the opportunity to do that. It's not for everybody. You don't need this kind of mixed use in some subdivisions. People should have the choice to live in an entirely residential subdivision. But if someone chooses to live in close proximity to commercial, that's a choice too. In the case of some of the residents in this particular area that brought this to light, they chose at some level to be near commercial. Maybe they didn't plan on sharing the backyard with it, but it's 2 blocks away. It's a block and a half away. They're off of 59, they're close to 190 in many cases. So, it gives people options. And the most importantly right now, gives these people the option to move on with their lives.
No, I understand that. I'm not against it. I'm just saying, as written, is this gonna, in any kind of way, be taken advantage of by, that's all I have to say.
There are people who are going to try and take advantage of no matter what we write. So we keep an eye out for it. We find an issue, positive or negative, and we address that issue. That's why we have the amendment process.
Mr. Matthews?
Just one question off of what Jimmy was saying. Currently, we prohibit somebody from building a house in an HC1. And there's a good reason. I mean, we don't really want to allow a single-family residential house next to a huge edifice in
Well,
in
and-
HC1.
and the theory in that
But
is-
that's their choice.
That's their choice,
this
and the
will allow
theory
it.
in that is to, you know, everybody talks about zoning and protecting the residential from the commercial. I've seen situations where you're trying to protect the commercial and industrial from residential. When I worked in Lafayette, we had a lot of pipe yards in the oil field, and people would buy a lot, build a house, then want you to shut down the pipe yard.
Yeah.
They had no
airports,
zoning. It was wide open. So it goes both ways, but, you know, everything that we do has those fringes where people can push the envelope no matter what we do. So we do our best to come up with the best legislation. If we need to tweak it, we tweak it.
But currently, we would have no protection with the large industrial HC3. The biggest thing you could put in HC3, somebody buying a lot next door and putting a house on it.
10,000. On HC3, yeah, I mean, if they choose to buy an HC3 property, hopefully their appraiser and their bank lets them know what the potential property is next door. And that's part of the due diligence. I know lay people very often don't do or don't pay enough attention to. That's part of the due diligence you need to do when you buy your property. I think these citizens are an example. They relied on people to do that for them, and it wasn't done. And it's caused some issues.
Okay.
Mr. Owen?
I have a question for our attorney. In the case where there's a subdivision that has been approved with restrictive covenants in it that prohibit the use of any part of the house to be used for offices, this would not in any way affect that.
Restrictive covenants are a private contract between the property owners within that
No,
subdivision.
but what I'm thinking about is in the case, like we're saying here, with the one gentleman that talked about his subdivision, that he was having trouble selling the lots. I don't know if it does, but if that subdivision was approved with covenants that said you can't have an office in your home, okay? And we've got a lot of those. My pastor was told that in his subdivision, he had to move his office out of his home back to the church, okay? And that was enforced
But who was it done by?
by the subdivision.
By the subdivision. It's a
Okay.
private contract among the
Okay.
citizens of that
But my
subdivision.
point is, if we do this, and it solves the problem of the subdivision that the gentleman talked about earlier, it's not gonna in any way affect any of those rules that are currently, okay, that's my
Yeah,
only
correct.
question.
It doesn't
Two
change
separate.
those private contracts.
That's
Private
correct.
contracts are still in place, okay. That's correct.
All right, Mr. Randolph.
In reference to the lady that came.
Pull your mic down, Tony.
In reference to the lady that came up and addressed the issue with car lot being allowed with this, is it correct for us to say that the ordinance that we have in front of us, referencing what is recommended for us to vote on tonight, we will not have that situation to deal with?
It could occur in high enough highway commercial districts. It could occur the first 3 lots off of Highway 59, 2 or 3 blocks off of Highway 59 from 190. That is highway commercial. That allows a very small car lot, because there are some that are existing there already. They pre-existed the comprehensive rezoning. It would not occur in the NC districts, which is the majority of Highway 59. Using Highway 59 as an example, obviously this affects more than just Highway 59, but that's the one that it, at least in the short term, has affected the most.
But Sidney, with this ordinance, we're allowing residential in commercial, not commercial in residential.
Correct.
So we're not going to be putting car lots next door to residences by virtue of this ordinance. We're going to allow people to put a residence
Next to the car
car lot if that's what they want to do.
Or if the property's vacant, the car lot could go there if the property's vacant, it was a rezoning case that you may recall from Big Branch, where the car lot wanted to expand. That's the reference Ms. Stevens is making, in how you have that transition. And the way St. Tammany Parish developed along the state highways without zoning for a long time, you have those inherent conflicts that we're constantly dealing with. We have single-family residence right against highway commercial, very intense highway commercial up off of 190. We didn't make those transitions in the early 80s. And sometimes the development was done before the early 80s. But the early 80s is when we got zoning in place, where you could have made those transitions. So, we're kind of dealing with the past and planning for the future and trying to make the best decisions we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fontenot. Ms. Casabon, you have another question?
No, just that my motion still stands.
Okay, we have a
Call for
motion by
question.
Ms. Casabon, seconded by Mr. Matthews. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7, zoning case 14-02-019, ordinance to amend the St. Tammany Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1 zoning, Section 5.27, MD1 Medical Residential District, Section 5.28, MD2 Medical Residential District, Section 5.29, MD3 Medical Residential District, relative to buffer, setback, and height regulation. Staff?
This is a proposal by a councilman through council motion. Essentially what it does, beginning in the 3 medical districts, it requires a 100-foot no-cut buffer anytime the MD districts abut a single-family residential district. So you'd have 100-foot. It also has some language about if you have dead trees, replacing trees, kind of the technical details, but the essence of the ordinance is to require a 100-foot buffer on all MD districts where they abut single-family residential districts.
Thank you, Mr. Fontenot. Anyone in the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Terry Stevens, I spoke before. She has my cards. Is there a height restriction, or has that been removed?
And the building or dwelling exceeds 35 feet in height, the 100-foot.
Be great if you strike that, because we've got situations like we've already discussed where the auto lot went next door to residential. We've got situations like Brewster Road, where that transition that Sydney talked about a couple of minutes ago is something that perhaps was left out in the 80s, but we need to put it in now, because the residential areas, maybe some of you are experiencing the same thing that we are over on Dove Park Road with an MD1 that now abuts residential. One side has a great buffer. It's got a 100-foot no-cut buffer. The other side, nothing. We've got a 3-story building there that we brought a pretty graphic for you one meeting prior, that now the residential will get a very clear shot of, and it's really quite unfair to those people. This was all single-family, A1, one house per 5-acre residential before it was rezoned. So what I would encourage you to consider is take the 35-foot requirement off if properties are over 5 acres, so that smaller properties wouldn't be affected. But if you've got a larger property that you're considering, it would only be fair to require and provide a 100-foot no-cut buffer between a residential and a commercial property. Taking it one step further, you've got some other really big developments that are coming down the pike, like, for instance, Tammany, which doesn't have a lot of, and I'm just using that as an example because there's one corner of Tammany that's got warehouse uses within that PUD, and that particular corner of the development doesn't have a buffer on it, and that's where the only residential is that touches the entire project. So they would really benefit. Those people who live on that one street where there's 6 or 8 houses that have been there forever, long before this new development will be here, could certainly benefit from a 100-foot buffer. So as I say, I would encourage you to enact across the board, but certainly for MD1, which we're affected by 2 and 3, a 100-foot no-cut buffer or densely planted buffer between all residential and commercial properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Hi.
Jeff Shane of the Jones Fussell Law Firm. I'm here this evening representing the Archdiocese of New Orleans, and we are in support of the legislation that's before you. One thing that we would ask you to consider in subsection 1 of items, well, let's just say subsection 1 of MD1, MD2, and MD3, I believe the height should be 35 feet rather than 30 feet, because I believe that the purpose of this amendment was to make sure that the height in the MD would be consistent with the maximum height in the adjoining residential district. And I have conferred with staff and understand that 35 feet is in fact the maximum height. I think this is a great ordinance. Again, make sure that it's clear. We understand that this imposes a code buffer as it relates to the Archdiocese property, which is not currently in place. I don't agree with all of Mrs. Stevens' statements with regard to the fact that in our project there are no buffer. That's not the case. There is a buffer. There is a setback. In fact, for all of your zones, since she brought up other zones, where those zones abut residential, and staff correct me if I'm wrong, you in fact have buffer and setback requirements, and it's usually the more restrictive setback of the residential zone. So the misnomer that there's no buffer, no setback where, say, a commercial or an industrial, or in this case, tonight we're only addressing MD in this ordinance. Your code, I think, handles that well, but I understand the reason why people want protection, and that if, in fact, there's going to be structures that could be taller than the structures in their residentially zoned property, why they need that separation. And I've discussed this with the Archdiocese. We think it's a good piece of legislation, and again, subject to the one change that I'd ask you to consider. I hope that you recommend it to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Yes, sir, Mr. Fontenot.
Chairman, just for clarification, the 30 feet that Mr. Shane pointed out does in the existing ordinance, it reads 30 feet. It does not read 35. So if you want to change that, you'd have to make a motion to change that. It wasn't a typo in the sense that 35 foot is what's actually in the code. The MD code has 30 feet as that max.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matthews.
Actually, I think that whole portion, number 1, is in conflict with 2A. Since you can't do anything in the first 100 feet, it has to be a no-cut buffer, you can't have a structure of 35 feet or 30 feet in the first 100 feet. Or am I reading it wrong?
Terry, did you draft this?
Yeah, we put it together. We did put it together.
Is
I'm
it-
looking at it now, and
The way I'm reading it is where an MD property abuts a single family residentially zoned property, being hereinafter defined as the boundary line between MD1 and residential property, and the building or dwelling exceeds 35 feet in height, there's a 100-foot buffer required.
right.
You have a copy?
Mr. Shane.
I'm not sure they're in conflict. Don't you think that number 2 clearly covers the situation where the structures are in excess of 35 feet?
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it.
Okay.
If the
Excess.
structure's in excess of
Only in
35
excess
feet,
do you
then
trigger the
require
buffer.
Okay.
If you're 30, I
If we
think,
got- if we got a 20-foot building,
no,
I can put it in that first 100 feet with no buffer.
Correct.
no, there is a buffer.
You have your
that
standard
where
not
setback.
this
MD
buffer, not
Yes,
this
sir,
buffer.
not the
Not this
100-foot buffer, but that's
Yeah,
correct.
not that 100-foot no-cut
Because the
buffer.
thinking is that the height, this is addressing height
Okay.
issues. As long as the height is no greater than the maximum height in the adjoining residential district, presumably there's no more need for a 100-foot no-cut buffer on the MD1 side than there would be for a 100-foot no-cut buffer on the residential side,
Okay,
which would be ludicrous.
okay.
Not suggesting that. So,
Well,
and I
we've been
think
discussing
the
this up
30
here.
feet in the code in number 1 presumably
and
is
forth,
just
okay.
erroneous when it was done.
I'd like to move to amend it, number 1, in each of the districts, medical districts, to 35 feet.
Okay, we have a motion by
And
Mr.
otherwise,
Matthews to
Approve the changes.
amend
Excuse me,
the
could you
30
just-
feet to 35 feet. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Davis. Discussion, yes, ma'am.
Can you just clarify what exactly that means? So if there's a 30-foot building in an institutional use next to a residential use, they're going to be required to have a 100-foot no-cut buffer?
30 foot? No.
If there's a 30-foot tall building, 35-foot tall building, there
Above
will be,
35 feet.
they
They'll have
w-
to have,
they'll be required. Okay, so what if they only have a 25-foot buffer? Then they only get 15 feet?
Be standard setbacks in landscaping.
And that's what it is. It's 15 feet and it's not even a no-cut buffer. That's the problem. Because now we've got residential up against commercial and large commercial in this particular case that I'm referring to. And beyond the 24-foot height for the single-story building is the 3-story apartment building that will be within clear eye shot of the residences all around this property,
and that's
save
more
the
than
opposite
35
side.
feet, isn't it? Isn't that greater than 35
Oh,
feet?
yeah, it's
Then
50
it
feet
has
tall.
to have the 100-foot no-cut buffer.
And they've got that because they've got wetland, but that doesn't help the guy on the other side who doesn't have that protection from this commercial development. So my point is, it's a commercial development buffer that you need. So this height within that at that boundary line shouldn't make any difference. That's what my suggestion is. The building height at the commercial residential property line shouldn't make any difference. You've got that barrier between commercial and residential to protect those people from the commercial development. As I say, we went from 1 house per 5 acres to now there is 3-story apartment building with 300 and some people who will inhabit it and cluster homes, which is truly unfair to the people who have lived all around there with much lesser zoning up to that point. So the least you could do is offer them that buffer between the commercial and the residential uses. It's, like I said, the same thing as the Brewster Road issue, what they would appreciate. It's the same thing the car lot people would have appreciated, and it's what we would appreciate you considering as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to amend what's before us from 30 to 35 foot. No further discussion, please vote. Martha? Motion carries. Okay. Now, do we have a motion on the ordinance as amended?
Move to approve the ordinance as amended.
Moved by Mr. Matthews. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Clear.
Seconded by Mr. Davis.
Clear.
Any further discussion? Please vote. This is the ordinance.
Ms. Casabon, Mr. Warren?
I swear I can't.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Old business. We have any old business we need to hear? Any new business? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
you.
Second. Vote yes.